Welcome to Something to Talk About. My name is Taco, and what do we got here? We got another remake. I am going back and covering characters that I covered at the beginning of my Song of Ice and Fire creator life. We're covering Wyl of Wyl. Yeah, Wyl of Wyl. So if you don't know what's going on here, you can pause this. You can read this. This is one of my Song of Ice and Fire character lore videos. If you don't know what a Song of Ice and Fire is, well, then it's weird that you're here. Yeah, so a few years ago when I started doing this shindig, I didn't think anybody would come. It's a Wayne's World 2 reference. All right, so first few characters I covered, I'm going back, not really few, first chunk, I'm going back and I'm recovering them. So this is after I've kind of figured out my format a lot more. I've been doing this for 2 years now. Yeah, so that's it. So we're going to cover Wyl of Wyl. And so when I first started doing these, I did really, really small characters. Flemmet Brax, who I dropped my mouse, remade a year ago. He was a bigger character, but like Guy Lawston, not so much. Wyl of Wyl, not so much. But I'm going to add a lot more context here for Wyl of Wyl and actually kind of talk a lot more about the First Dornish War and so on and so forth. But before we get going, spoilers for the Fire and Blood Volume 1, I guess. He's in the first little bit of that. He's like blinking him, it's only a couple paragraphs, and I'm somehow going to stretch this out into a long video. But also a trigger warning. So, Wyl of Wyl is a awful man, and he does two really kind of horrific things. One of them much more horrific. And if you're not comfortable with violence of a specific nature, if you get what I'm saying, you might want to skip this one. This was a little rough. So trigger warning for that kind of, I don't want to say it, violence, because yeah, he's a horrible fictional character and he does some horrible stuff. So yeah, so trigger warning for that. Okay, cool. Wyl of Wyl. There, I even wrote it here. Spoilers and trigger warning. Please note, Wyl of Wyl was the Lord of Wyl, the head of House Wyl during the First Dornish War. He was also known as the Widow Lover, because that's a horrible nickname, and had at least one son, Walter Wyl. It is unknown whether Wyl was just his first and last name, Wyl, or if the seat was just Wyl, right? And the first Wyl was a nickname. Like, you're from Boston, and you're called Boston of Boston, even though your name's like Fred. Is there a Fred Boston? Yeah, so I don't know if his name is actually Wyl, and his name is Wyl, and that sounds weird, so they say Wyl of Wyl. We don't know, but Wyl of Wyl. It's the only fun and goofy thing about him. All right, let's talk about House Wyl. House Wyl of the Boneway. You want to go to the Boneway? Why are you doing this bit? We're all about to die. Is a house from Castle Wyl in northern Dorne, which is near the River Wyl. This reminds me back to Wayne's World 2, like Spurgen of Kjorgen near the Fjorgen Fjords. My name is Wyl of Wyl, near Wyl. I'm from Wyl, near the River Wyl. What's your first name? Bill. Oh man, didn't see that coming. All right. Yeah. So near the River Wyl, it is one of the principal houses sworn to House Martell of Sunspear. Their sigil is a black adder biting a heel surrounded by yellow. Yeah, pretty awesome sigil, actually. The Wyls have long fought against the Lords of the Dornish Marches. The family has tunneled beneath their castle Wyl to link caverns of a greater defense. Wyla of Wyl was a warrior maid who fought besides Yoren of Ironwood, God, these names, against King Duran the Young at the Battle of the Bloody Pool, and was turned back. Okay, well, that's good that they're turned back. They're probably doing nefarious stuff. Also, of course, the snake biting the foot. This is also kind of tied to the Aemon the Dragonite story of the Pit of Vipers, which I'll get to when I remake my Aemon the Dragonite video. So be excited for that. All right, so let's actually talk about Wyl. And we won't yet, but in order to talk about him, we're going to have to talk about the First Dornish War. So that's the era that we're hanging out in, right? Right after the conquest, during the conquest, right? You guys follow me. The First Dornish War. During Aegon's conquest, Queen Rhaenys Targaryen was sent to Dorne in her brother's name. Instead of confronting the Dornish army in the Prince's Pass, Rhaenys and Meraxes, her dragon, flew over the pass to find castles abandoned, then continued to fly to the Planky Town, where only women and children remained. At Sunspear, she found Maria Martell, the aged princess of Dorne, waiting alone. If you want more about this specific encounter, my Diria Martell, go watch my Diria Martell video, because then I actually do kind of break down this encounter a lot more. I'm kind of skipping over it to get to Wyl. But yeah, Madeira Martell, however you say that name. So yeah, she finds the old lady, the aged princess of Dorne, the yellow toad of Dorne. Maria defies Rhaenys, stating that they would never fight nor kneel. And then Rhaenys departs, like, all right, fine, I'll fight you another day. But the Targaryens subsequent made no direct attempts to conquer the harsh deserts of Dorne. They kind of give up for the time being, instead focusing on their main conquest in the heart of Westeros. And then Dorne was the only kingdom. As such, Dorne is the only kingdom not to be conquered by Aegon the First of the initial conquest. Yeah, Dorne comes in much later. If you didn't know that, I'm assuming you know that. A lot of people know that, but yeah, Dorne isn't really brought in until Daeron II, and that's even after the Dance of Dragons. That's pretty far down the line. Okay, in 4 AC, so they go kind of uneasy peace, right? And then then he conquers the rest, starts building the Red Keep. King's Landing becomes a city. He goes and gets anointed by the High Septon in Old Town. And then 4 years later is when he's like, I should probably go take Dorne. So yeah, he launches an invasion into Dorne intended on completing his conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. However, although House Wyl led an assault against the Targaryen forces in Boneway, the other Dornish lords abandoned their castle, neither willing to defend nor willing to bend the knee. Just like, you know, the Yellow Toad said, this is Dorne. And it's called back. And yeah, so Wyl is going to go fight in the Boneway, right? But everyone else, like, because of the dragons, everyone's pretty much abandoning and just kind of like leaving their castles and letting them starve out. Is anyone who takes a castle, they can't really hold it forever because it's the middle of the desert. The Dornish know what they're doing. These guys don't. You get what I'm saying. So the Boneway the first assault was led by Queen Rhaenys on her way to Sunspear. She seized the Dornish seats she encounters on her dragon, and then Meraxes burned the Planky Town. Wow. Meanwhile, King Aegon and Lord Harren Tyrell fight in the Prince's Pass, facing heavy resistance as their forces were ambushed by Dornish defenders, who then fled and hid as soon as dragons took air. So they attack as soon as there's a dragon, the Dornish bounce, right? They're smart. And as soon as the dragons took air. And Lord Orys Baratheon led a force through the Boneway, and we're going to be talking about that a lot. Lord Harlan Tyrell, while leading his army to Hellholt, saw many of his soldiers die of thirst due to the heat. Those who finally managed to reach Hellholt found the castle to be deserted. King Aegon briefly besieged Ironwood and found Skyreach abandoned and fought the, quote, champion of Ghost Hill. Story for another time. What I'm getting at is that so if you look at the army kind of in 4 ways, right? You have Rhaenys flying right over it again, just like she did before. And then you have Harlan Tyrell, who's doing decent, and he makes it all the way to House Wyl, finds it abandoned, not really doing decent. He's pretty much just everyone's kind of left him alone, so the desert just kills him, right? And then you have Aegon, who then is doing okay kind of taking some castles, but he doesn't really make too far. But even though if you consider those successes, Orys is going a little different. So Hand of the King, Orys Baratheon. This is not a Orys Baratheon video, but I have a lot about Orys Baratheon here. Fared worse in his assault up the Boneway. So he's going up the Boneway. Ooh, sounds great. His army was pelted with rocks and arrows, right? Because there's like sheer cliffs on either side, and spears from above. Well, the cunning Dornishmen launched the night raid. So now we're talking about Wyl. Killing most of his men. Towards the end, Wyl and the Dornishmen blocked the Boneway on both front of his army and behind. So they're now trapped as they're hitting them from above during the night. And then Wyl of Wyl managed to capture Lord Orys and many of his bannermen and knights. Yeah, so they're going through kind of like a very narrow passage. And then it gets blocked on either side. And the Dornishmen are throwing spears, rocks, whatever you want. And they're just devastating these guys. And then finally, they eventually surrender and Orys and other people get taken hostage. All right. So Orys the captive. Orys remained Wyl's captive. This is the character we're talking about. We're finally getting to Wyl of Wyl, right? Remained Wyl's captive for years until the Targaryens ransomed him and his men back in 7 AC. So that's at least 3 years because they started the war for Dorne again at 4 AC. For each, yeah. So he then ransomed them back for each man's weight in gold. When the captives were freed, however, the Wyl had their sword hands chopped off so they could not be used against Dorne, which included the hand of the king, Orys. So Orys gets his freaking sword hand chopped off by Wyl of Wyl. Orys became known as Orys One Hand thereafter. It is said that after the release of Orys, the other lords, the war entered a new stage. Yeah, Aegon's getting a little mad. It's not quite Dragon's Wrath, because that's after what happens to Rhaenys, but he's getting a little more mad at this point. As King Aegon was now intent on revenge. In retaliation for his treachery, King Aegon descended on the mountain fastness of House Wyl with his dragon Balerion the Black Dread and burned them to rubble. Though the Wyls managed to take refuge in their caves and tunnels beneath the mountains. So Wyl of Wyl doesn't get killed here, but they are like, all right, hostages, give them back. And they go, yeah, gold in their weight. And it's like, oh my God, that's a lot of gold. All right, fine. Here's a mountain of gold, Wyl. Give us back our guys. And they're like, all right, but first, and then comes. So then Aegon gets his hand back without a hand, and then he's like, dude, and then he jumps on that dragon and he burns that castle down for no reason. Because the Wyls just go down into their caves underneath the castle. Castles get a little hot, probably tilt a little bit. I mean, because they're just made of stone, so they're not going to burn down. But, yeah. Wyl of Wyl survives to be horrendous later on. Okay. So, yeah, they took refuge. Orys was said to have become crabbed and bitter after that. Yeah, he cut his hand off. So he resigned his office of hand in return to the Stormlands. Yeah, he not only does Aegon lose his hand, but he loses his hand. Orys doesn't want to be his hand anymore because he's like, I will not be called the hand without a hand. Like, no, his pride takes it out, and he's like, no, I'm going back to Storm's End. See you, man. And yeah, that probably is what really pissed Aegon off because Orys, as far as we know, is a pretty good hand of the king. Man, this Wyl of Wyl. All right, Orys said to, leave. All right, he became obsessed with vengeance against the Dornish. Yeah, we'll get to that. But first, this is this next slide's the trigger warning slide. So if you made it this far and you're like, yeah, this is too bad. Again, we're get a little bit of not cool S-word violence and assault. So keep that in mind going in. Please, if you can't handle that, please leave now. Thank you. Okay. The infamous act. The most infamous act. According to Maester Yandel, the writer of The World of Ice and Fire, I've read that book, the Wyl of Wyl committed infamous deeds which are still remembered in Fontaine and Old Oak. Yeah, these guys will never forget this. According to Archmaester Gildane, the Wyl of Wyl turned up uninvited at the wedding of Sir John Caffrin to the heir to Fontaine, right? And Alice Oakhart, the daughter of Lord Oakhart. So they were, he was marrying, John Caffrin of Caffrin was marrying Alice Oakhart of Oakhart, in 12 AC. So he shows up and then he murders Lord Oakhart and most of the guests, forcing Alice to watch as John, her soon-to-be husband, or was husband at this point, it was her wedding, gets castrated. Jeez. And then Alice and her handmaids were assaulted, you know which word I'm replacing here, by the Wyl and his men, and then sold off to a Mirish slaver. Gildane calls this the most infamous act of the First Dornish War. Yeah. Wow. Dude, I can't believe the Red Wedding is even considered a big deal, because this is so much like, dude, all right, Red Wedding is definitely a tragedy. Those people die. But geez, man, Wyl of Wyl was nuts. This is some crazy stuff. And yeah, this is, when it comes to war crimes that we talk about in A Song of Ice and Fire, Wyl of Wyl's up there. He's up there with Tywin. Maybe he's past Tywin when it comes to the type of war crimes he does, because that's some more crimey. All right, I promised it, so let's get to Orys' revenge in 13 AC when Princess Dyria, I did do a video for her, and I couldn't say her name there either, came to King's Landing to provide peace terms. Orys argued for sending the princess back home to her father Namor without a hand. Okay, they didn't do it. So Daria Martell's like, hey, I've came here. We need peace between Dorne. My crazy grandma died. Here's a letter. And it's like, do you want peace? Do you not? And everyone's like, maybe we should do peace. Maybe we shouldn't. And then Orys is like, maybe we should chop off her hand. Orys, why are you even here? Go home. You quit like a couple years ago. Yeah. All right, a year ago. All right, so now we're going to jump ahead. So Lord Walter Wyl, the son of the widow lover. So Wyl of Wyl is dead at this point, so he's not going to be featured anymore. But we got more, right? So Wyl of Wyl's gone, but there is his son, Walter Wyl, right? He led a host for the Vulture King, which was another one of those rebellions, in 37 AC during the Second Dornish War, is what it was called. He led a huge army to reave the lands north of the Red Mountains, attacking Blackhaven, Nightsong. The Vulture King split his host, having one half led by Walter Wyl to besiege Stonehelm, the seat of House Swan. The Lord of Storm's End, Orys Baratheon, so we're talking about, eager for revenge against the Dornish, led his forces from Storm's End one last time to participate in the Vulture Hunt. After defeating the Dornishmen at Storm's Helm, Orys chopped off Walter's hands and his feet. Jeez, as vengeance for what Walter's father's behavior years earlier. This is a long time ago now. I remember that happened in 12 AC. This is 37 AC. Yeah, he chops off Walter's hands and feet. Well, Wyl's host sat besieging Storm's Helm. Orys' forces crushed the Dornishmen beneath the walls of the castle. Lord Walter Wyl, son of widow lover, was brought to Orys, who wounded but alive. Oh, I'm saying this twice. That's really funny. Orys chopped off Walter's feet, sword hand, then his other hand, followed by, both his feet, which I already said, which he was called his usury. So he chopped off his hand, and then he's like, oh, and the other one, and the feet. what? We only chopped one of your hands off. He's like, it's usury. So what the usury is interest, right? He charged him a fig. On his trip home to Storm's End, Orys died of his wounds had taken in battle. Orys died content, according to his son Davos, smiling at the rotting hands and feet that are dangling from his tent. So yeah, that's really dark. Orys goes down a dark path of vengeance and really just chops up this dude. But yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to that slide. I wrote things twice. I write some of these when I'm really tired. So it happens. But yeah, so Orys finally gets his vengeance and some because he charged him a vig. So that's it. Walter is now chopped up. Wyl of Wyl's chopped up. Our story's done. Like I said, not too much. We got one more slide. That's a small one. Wyl of Wyl near the Wyl. No theories, just too small of a character. Early on in my vids, the characters I picked were very small, right? As you can see. I think when I first were picking characters, when I was first picking characters, I was re-listening to Fire and Blood and just writing down anyone that stuck out. First time I heard of Wyl of Wyl, I'm like, that's a goofy name. And then I hear about what he did, and I'm like, all right, I'll write that down. He's a nasty guy and leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And it sucks to see that he got away with it because Orys didn't get his vengeance on Wyl of Wyl, but instead on his son, Walter. And that's kind of the most messed up thing, is what he did at John Caffrey's wedding to Alice Oakhart, the horrible stuff he did to all the guests, everything, selling them to, slavery, all this awful, awful crap, and he gets away with it. His son gets chopped up and stuff, but Wyl of Wyl gets, he dies of natural causes, we guess, because it's not even stated how he died, so it wasn't even notable. Yeah, Wyl of Wyl sucks. That's what I'm getting at. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you're enjoying my remakes. I will be doing quite a lot of them, actually. I went back and looked at kind of my first phase of doing these. So if you want to know which videos I'll do, if you go back and look at my early stuff, whichever ones have my old thumbnails I had, where it was my face and just the shield with just one picture, those are the ones I'm going to redo. It's when I start making different looking thumbnails like the kind I make now. That's when so anytime before that. Okay, those are the ones I'm redoing. All right, thank you guys for watching. I won't ask if you had a good time because Wyl of Wyl's awful, but yeah, peace.